CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we've got what I consider to be a very special guest, long overdue. We've been planning this for a while. We're talking like 9 months. It's Nigel Hughes. He is Senior Vice President. He's also the head of product at Brightly. And a lot of you know Brightly is a Siemens company. And I had the absolute pleasure, the honor of meeting and spending time with Nigel when I was at Brightly Illuminate 2024. This was back in March out in Raleigh, North Carolina. Nigel, finally, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Awesome, Greg. It's really great to be here. And let's be honest, I was the problem that means it's taken from March to now to be here. So thank you for your patience is my first thing.
Indeed. And, you know, there's a lot going on with what you're doing, a lot of moving parts, teams, people, learning, staying in touch, whatever it might be. And anybody that doesn't understand the world of CMMS and software, right? Because, you know, obviously it's not just CMMS at Brightly. I mean, you're touching so many areas. You got Origin, you got Asset Essentials, and on like this, but there's so much more to it than what people could typically fathom unless they've been in those trenches. So before we get into your background and all things CMMS, because I like to keep it framed that way, I have a listener submitted question, and it is AI new?
No, I can go a lot deeper if you'd like.
Well, what's new or not new about it? Let's start there.
So, okay. So anybody who knows me right now is rolling their eyes going, oh my God, here he goes. So my background's AI. And I remember sitting as a young college student in my AI 101 class. And Dr. Patrick Olivier, who was my professor, said, AI is what we call software engineering before we understand it. And this was back in 91, 92. It's all fuzzy now. And what he really meant was, software engineering feels like super prescriptive. In fact, we're taught that, computers just do A, B, C in an order. And that, of course, is true. Except that when you discover a new algorithm, when you develop a new algorithm, kind of understanding its behavior, understanding everything you can do with that changes over time. So there's a guy out in MIT, a guy called Marvin Minsky, who developed a set of search algorithms back in the 60s and absolutely was considered groundbreaking AI. Well, now your washing machine runs those algorithms to figure out if the water's still dirty or not, and it's completely boring. So what happens is, as we continue to kind of push and discover new algorithms and new ways of working with computers, we get some things that we don't necessarily fully understand all of the ways of using them and all of the performance characteristics and understanding exactly how they're arriving at the answers that they're arriving at. And so that's all we're seeing. In fact, there's nothing in this, transformer models, LLMs. It's actually nothing new. What's changed is the scale we're running them at now is with modern GPUs and AI CPUs. So what we're doing with AI, what we're calling AI is new, but the idea isn't new.
So when we look at it that way, so I have one of my good friends, he's, a bona fide maintenance expert, triple smart guy. His name's Howard Penrose, Dr. Howard Penrose. He's known as the Motor Doc. And we talk about this a little bit on the podcast, but a lot off of the podcast where, it's really machine learning. It's language learning. It's programmatic. So to call it AI is, in fact, a misnomer. And I wanted to ask you if that's how you see it as well, because it sounded like it's not new and it's not what maybe marketers and people that like, to sell magic shiny bullets and all that kind of stuff tend to call it, right? Is that kind of fair or accurate?
No, I mean, look, we're straying into philosophy here, and that's okay, by the way. And actually, it's interesting in the surname Penrose. There's a guy, I think it's Roger Penrose, a mathematician, who, using halting theory, proved that AI would never be buildable. I've got an opinion about how he did that and whether that's true, a genuine artificial intelligence. But to go back to your point, look, there's a fundamental question of, I think, if we accept that we're intelligent, we're getting awfully deep now, but if we accept that we're intelligent, then if we can have something that is artificially as intelligent as us, probably depends on how you feel about what we are. If your belief is we're just a purely physical thing, we're a saltwater machine, if you like, then almost certainly, what we're doing, it might not be a simulation of this machine, but we're simulating the processes of this machine with a neural network. And therefore, yep, probably we are getting close to what we'd really truly consider a general artificial intelligence. If you think there's something more to it, there's a metaphysical or spiritual element to it, then maybe we'll never do that. And all we're doing is building a really, really complex, beautiful machine that's doing some really great stuff, but it isn't doing what we really do. And that idea of motivation and free will and a desire to do something. So yeah, we can get really deep. I mean, what I would probably say though is, and maybe where I really come from, and I don't think I'm not qualified to answer the big questions, but I'd almost say, well, does it matter? It's a bit like I don't want to take your podcast into a different rate of explicit category, but it's a bit like that quote about certain art types. You'll know it when you see it, and I believe it was American Supreme Court that came from. And I think AI is kind of, look, does it feel like it's being smart? Does it feel like it's just done something smart? Then maybe that's artificial intelligence, right?
Hmm. It, and yeah. See, now what's good about this is it's thought provoking, and that is, for me, that's the point. Is it thought provoking? Are you thinking? Are you thinking critically? Which I've said on the podcast and many more times when I'm not on the podcast, that critical thinking is something that I it should be on the endangered species list. In that, I think technology, uh, evolution in and of itself, even within the CMMS space or just the world in general, it can cause a degradation of those natural skill sets that we had to develop first and foremost as a survival mechanism. But yes, we don't want to spin out and get too far away from CMMS and technology. So we'll pick that one up later. I want to switch it in now to a little bit more on your background. And so you've been in the software space for some time now, and specifically in product management and related. So can you give us a little bit on how that all started? Maybe picking up on where you were already talking about it, and bring us up to present times, just a little tidbit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so first of all, there was no plan. But I always love the Steve Jobs quote when he said, "It's like looking back on your career. You can only tell the story when you look back. It's like joining the dots. You join the dots, and then you can see the picture, and then you tell the story." So I'm going to present it like a story, but I just want anybody listening who's interested in doing this kind of thing. There was no plan. Okay, just a sequence of decisions, one after another. But yeah, I mean, I started off doing some research into mobile robotics, or robots subjected to base motion, particularly interested in real time navigation systems, so things out in the real world. But the university I was working at was investing in some reasoning systems that looked at, instead of simulating electrical circuits by crunching a ton of numbers, looking at it qualitatively like a human does. And that enabled us to simulate electrical schematics so much faster than the number crunching method that we could do some really cool stuff with that, by layering some more AI on top of it, in fact, to interpret well, when that motor's turning, the windscreen wiper on a car, we were particularly interested in cars and aerospace at the time, would adjust. So um, uh, we were pretty successful. There's some things I can't be too explicit about, but we were working with some industrial partners. The technology was good. That company released a brand new product into the market that had a recall in the first 2 weeks, which was really bad. And they decided to run it through our system, which generated a failure modes and effects analysis, or FMEA. And it says, when this component goes wrong, this is the impact. And then right at the top of the report was, yeah, if this happens, this really undesirable thing happens that caused the recall. And so they said, okay, we want to use your software, but it's got to be, we can't buy from an academic university. You got to have a company. So we founded a business. Went on the normal kind of software journey. Taking on some venture capital and kind of grew it. And in 2002, 2003, we were acquired by an American company out on the West Coast from Portland, Oregon, called Mentor Graphics. They actually were looking at diversifying. They specialized in PCB and IC, so printed circuit board and integrated circuit, so the chips in everything design. But we're looking at diversifying, and we were looking at, instead of those kind of, to us, a PCB or a chip was just a component. We were looking at the system of systems that would go into a car or an aircraft or a cruise missile. And so they were looking at diversifying, and so purchased a bunch of smaller companies to enter a new market. I didn't intend to stay. In fact, if you want to know what the plan was, it was stay 6 months, and then I had another 10 ideas I wanted to go and do. But my gosh, it was exciting and interesting, and the folks at Mentor were some of the smartest people I'd ever met, and it's really hard to walk away from people smarter than you. So we decided to build a platform and really bring all of these products together and everything we'd learned. And it took, I think we were acquired by, Mentor was acquired by Siemens, which is how I came to be there in 2016. And at that point, now it was pretty clear it was going to be successful. And now the product line Capital, if anyone's interested, is probably the number one electrical design and system design suite that goes all through manufacturing and service and support as well on the planet. But I think, in 2002, no one knew we were going to do that. And by the time Siemens bought us, it was pretty clear we were well on the way. So I was responsible for product management in a variety of levels, kind of eventually everything being my fault. But in the beginning, just starting off with that little analysis tool and growing out. So yeah, that was my journey. And then about 2 years ago, I kind of just stopped for a second and said, well, I've been kind of on this journey since, I think, 1999. It's been really great, but I'm getting a little older now. Maybe I should do something else. So I took a little dogleg and moved within Siemens from the part of Siemens that bought Mentor was DISW, moved into SI to integrate this new acquisition they'd just made, which was Brightly. And from the R&D and portfolio, and that means, engineering and product side. And SI themselves were developing software competence. So there was a genuine, I needed to bring both together and join them up. And so got to do that. But I fell in love with Brightly. I fell in love with the market. There's not many industries you work with where you can your clients are everyone from carpenters to a CFO. And as you picked up in Illuminate, I like people. I like learning about people and spending time with them. So yeah, I fell in love with the company, the people that work there, but also the people that are our users out there in the world. So yeah, that's a lot of talking, but that's the journey.
Well, and talking is what we do. But the important thing about everything you just explained is if one takes a step back and kind of hears what's not said about that journey, it really goes well with kind of what the next question I had jotted down. And a lot of people know I don't give questions ahead of time. I like natural conversations, as if we bumped into each other at Illuminate or at a coffee shop, or who knows, maybe a bar. So the there's a lot of challenges when it comes to product management. And one of the things that's always been kind of important to me, but I also know it's really challenging, is how you manage teams, multiple products, and keep a bit of mindfulness about understanding the clients, the clientele that are actually the beneficiaries, because without them, we have nothing. How do you think you put that all together? Like, how do you what kind of challenges do you deal with? How do you deal with them without giving away any of your secret sauce? And how is it that you have such an awareness of what the clients are really trying to do? You even talked about FMEA, and so that tells a bit of a story. So can you tackle that one?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, actually, it's interesting. We met at Illuminate. I think I'd started the job with Brightly as head of product in beginning of February. And actually, the beauty of it is, it's like a lot of things in life. There's actually no magic to it at all. How do you get to know the clients and the users? Go meet the clients and the users, and be curious and be interested in the answers and listen. It's, I mean, I think it's both, whilst the devil is in the details, and the kind of, actually one of the joys I have is really kind of drilling into a particular problem and really trying to understand, well, why is that a challenge for the client or the user, and why would it be really beneficial if we could kind of connect these two things together and make it just flow. But as you do that, it's both, everything, all the details are brand new, but the problems actually are surprisingly similar. And, it was one of the things, I mean, I think the first couple of kind of just going on site visits I did were with educational institutions. And, I wanted to kind of hit a mix. So I did some rural K-12 all the way through to some bigger city school districts, through to some of the universities and higher education facilities. And it's amazing. My team will roll their eyes when I say this. I like to, when I'm talking to a client, I'm often sitting there with my pen sketching what I call a swim lane, but it's just trying to understand, as I understand what they do and how information and tasks are flowing through their business. I just like to kind of capture that as I go. And then at the end of the conversation, I can put it up on a screen and say, okay, this is what Nigel heard. Tell me where I got it wrong. So, I actually keep, and so I call those swim lanes or flows. I keep a little library of those. And for each product, as I talk to all those clients, I try and find, right, but what's the common theme? Out of all of these, if you line them up, you and I are old enough to remember acetate. For anybody younger listening to your podcast, go Google it. But it's the old way before PowerPoint, you used to be able to slide up all the sheets of acetate together and you could see this almost composite picture. And that's what I do with the swim lanes, line them up, look for what's common, and also be interested in the differences, because that's often the difference between, okay, well, a K-12 school, the difference is in the entry to the flow, but then the problem's the same from a higher education institution. But actually a higher education institution actually looks almost exactly the same as manufacturing, except that at the back end or the ERP integration might not be as critical. So that's what I'm always trying to do. Is I'm a pictorial thinker, so I try and kind of make that picture. And for me, it's the commonalities are interesting, and then the differences are interesting as well. And so kind of understanding how you need to tune your products to those different problems, whilst maybe having a common core that you can leverage to deliver those products efficiently.
There's a lot to everything you just kind of explained, and we could go in many different directions with it. But what's important there so far, and I'll figure out later what else might be important, right? Because we might have to talk about that on a future episode or a future conversation at least. But this is one of the biggest challenges with the CMMS space in general, let alone any other technologies or anything else, right? You could probably apply this to everything. Is we're looking for those commonalities so that we do in fact have a way forward based on understanding foundational elements, understanding of those commonalities. But you keep referencing that the nuance, which I like the nuance and specificity of how solutions work to solve a very specific one client's problems. And that kind of covers that. That's what's necessary. And that's not easy to do when you're going to mobilize that into team environments, right? Because it's not like you're sitting there doing all the programming and the building and the connecting. You're conveying those goals, those issues we need to solve. So is there a style that you apply or that you use when it comes to working with your teams and kind of empowering them? Maybe even which ones are visual learners versus audible and so forth?
That's a good question. Of course, the reality is, and I just want to be fully honest, I'm now sufficiently successful that I don't do anything useful at all. I don't do the work anymore. But when I try and
say that one more time. You're sufficient.
Yeah, I've been sufficiently successful that I don't do anything useful at all anymore, and it's my team that do all the actual hard work. But my philosophy that I try and get into the team. So first of all, yeah, you kind of need all of those things. Draw a swim lane to communicate the flow visually, but also then I think it's always about what I always use is, well, there's two: distillation and specificity. So, okay, but cut away the noise. What's there at the core, and exactly what do you want? So, and every single word you use when you're communicating to an engineer, what needs to be built, every word is an opportunity to confuse and get it wrong. So, really, really kind of step back, be specific. Because I mean, you're right. It's a funny job, in one way. It's like the old Office Space movie, for those that remember it. But we kind of sit there, we listen to the client, we figure out what needs to be done, then we turn around and tell engineering, and they build it, and then we turn back around to the client and say, yeah, we've built this, and it's like, do we actually do anything? Are we just passing it across? And of course, the answer is tight in. We talk to 20 clients and we consolidate it. But the piece where you're talking to the technology team, I always think it's like trying to do a jigsaw puzzle through a letterbox. You can't really control what's happening, so you really better be good at describing what it is you need. And yep, that's a bit of pictures, but it's be really specific and distill your words down into what's the fewest words you can use to get everything communicated.
This is so interesting to me because in my past, in working with, not directly, I was less directly involved with development teams and engineers when building solutions of any kind, right? I've had a couple of experiences with that. And sometimes the simplest thing becomes so complex when you're conveying what needs to be built. And look, I'm a button clicker, right? I'm looking at it in the most simplistic way that, oh yeah, we need this here and this is why, and it has to produce this outcome and all this. And then by the time it comes back and development comes through, maybe we're in beta, maybe we're pre-beta, and I'm looking at it, once it finally gets back to me, like I've got leadership, I'm part of it, but I'm not top of the food chain, so to speak. And now I'm getting it and I'm going, well, how could they have missed this and this? And you sometimes have to, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm right about this, but you sometimes have to take a step back and realize, how could that engineer or programmer possibly have understood everything I've done in my life, all the clients that I've talked to? they are not customer facing. And that's by design the majority of the time. That's why we have product leaders and teams that then work with teams. And it sounds like meetings before the meetings so that we can have the actual meeting, but that's kind of the way it works. It's like teaching someone how to tie their shoes that doesn't know what a shoe is or why we wear shoes.
And
And
that's I mean, I think you're spot on. And I mean, the joy of a team that's been working together for a long time is, in fact, the engineers, of course, do begin to understand the problem space and kind of grow familiar with it. But it it's funny, you kind of wonder why. I mean, it could be that the engineer didn't miss it, the product person missed it. And I mean, I think that speaks to something that when I started in software was not an option. But now the beauty of SaaS means actually we can go a lot quicker. But when I started, when you wanted to buy a piece of software, it came on a floppy disk or 15 floppy disks. And if something was wrong with that software, well, wait for version 2. That will be out in 18 months, and you can go buy another 15 disks. And fingers crossed, they've been less stupid this time. And now all the way to, I mean, I think on our kind of latest tech stack, we can deliver 59 updates a day, and in some of our Carbon Manager, our newest product that's getting out the door soon. So it's a completely different world, and what that means is I think you can take a different approach. Let's get the core out really quickly. Let's get it in users' hands. Let's see what they start to do with it. And then you can start to augment it really quickly in an incremental way. And, look, we couldn't do that in the old days. We'd leave people confused about how on earth we'd miss that most obvious thing that anybody in the industry would know for a year. Well, now, it can be a really short period of time. And we got a ton of technologies we can use to shorten that. So I think it's really exciting now. So what I say to the team now as well is, and what's the smallest thing that's useful that we can get out there in the world, and that we can start to iterate with our clients with, start to listen to our clients, and also look at the analytics if on how they're using it, and we getting the outcomes we wanted, and we can do that so much more quickly now. It's a real gift.
You're reminding me of I've had a guest on a few times. He's a friend, and his name is Paul LaChance. Not so sure if you know him or not, but Paul and I were talking about this concept of the compression of time. And that was what you were reminding me of as you were describing this, how we can move so much quicker and how things change so much more quickly with regards to how people are moving through this world with technology and smartphones and all these different things. So we can accomplish so much more. One of the challenges I wanted to ask about, I'm assuming you encounter this at times where those things that are forgotten or overlooked, but we don't find out until later, and we now have to go back and try to figure out how to fix that. Do you think it's true that sometimes some oversights cannot be fixed and they do have to sometimes be lived with?
Wow, that's a deep question. And I had a pretty emotional reaction to that. So I'm going to just hit you with the emotional reaction. I really hope not.
Yeah.
And look, it's definitely possible. I haven't got an example that's over a decade old from Brightly yet. But in my previous role, electrical systems, wires are pretty important. And there was one bit of our object model when we're trying to decide what a wire was going to be as a piece of data, going from the very earliest idea on a system diagram through to a service manual where a technician is going to be looking at and caring about whether it's read and where it's terminated and if it's come loose. All the things we could have thought about. And, we were, I think, pretty good, 98% accurate, but there are a few things we got wrong. And we lived with was still wrong as we left, and it drove usability challenges, and and stuff like that. Now, it was fixable, but making the time to fix it, when, clients understandably right, but now we need this and their market and world is changing that we need to respond to. It's not that it could not be fixed, but making the time to fix it and bring everyone with us was the real challenge. It's like water behind a dam. It can be, look, that river was fine, but if we break the dam now, people running and screaming and drowning.
You just hit on one of the reasons I asked the question. And so sometimes, I'm out here, I want to make the industry better. I'm really after incredible client experiences and outcomes. I really am. I am always chasing this elusive win-win because I think that's the sweet spot, but it's really hard to do. And there's so many changes, call them ebbs and flows, oversights. Oh man, how could you guys overlook that? But there's this immense pain that comes from, and it's so disruptive to take that time to make those changes on something that was overlooked. And we have to be fair. There's a lot of companies out here in this space, way more clients, right? Even if we just look at manufacturing in general in North America, how many are there? I can't even tell you the numbers. I just know it's a huge magnitude. And I'm asking this question because I want to try to, in a sense, be fair to everyone out there delivering these technologies, working with these clients. So many things change, and they change quickly now, just like we were talking about previously, where iterations can happen much more quickly. Well, the changes are also happening like that. So how on earth do you keep up? So I want everyone out there to, and I think a lot of our listeners on CMMS radio, they understand that there's going to be challenges. Sometimes you got to deal with workarounds, and you do have to live with some of this pain. And I wanted to ask someone that's, been here doing this, if I'm kind of understanding that right. So you've confirmed that. And the reason I'm talking about it is I want to be at least a little bit fair, because I've had those challenges in our past technology. I've been at companies and seen things that you're scratching your head going, how can you keep going if you know that doesn't work? And I'm not here to crush anybody necessarily, right? Maybe in 2025 I'll go scorched earth. I'm not sure, but I have another question related to product and in this big world of CMMS and what you really do. Do you find that it helps that your team members? Now I'm talking about the ones you work with directly that might also talk to clients and talk to the teams internally. I mean, at Brightly, you have, easily 1,000 employees. And I'm wondering, do you think it makes a big difference if those individuals have backgrounds and experiences in manufacturing, in school environments, in skilled nursing, in name the industry? Does that make a difference? Or is that just something people like to say to differentiate themselves, that our team members have been there, been in the trenches? I'm curious.
No, I think it really does make a difference. I always say when you're looking for a person, at least in the product and technology world,
Mm-hmm.
there are three fundamental kind of characteristics, things you want somebody to be great at. You really want to understand their market. That's the industry piece. They've been out there, markets, just the industry. You want them to understand their job. That could be product management, could be client success, it could be sales, but you want them to understand that. And you also want them to understand the business, like, what are we trying to achieve here? What are the basic levers we've got to be successful? And I always say, if I can get two, I've got a great employee. So then as you look at your business as a whole, I think you absolutely need a mix. And it's funny, just, again, relatively new to Brightly, but ton of experience from my past. So clearly I've just said it, it's one of the top three requirements, but it's hard to make that change. And I think it's often underestimated, because just knowing it is one thing, then being able to apply it is another thing. And, I've seen, not yet in this space, but, historically, I've seen people, really great people who are amazing in the industry, really struggle to be successful when they then come over to the software side. And it's not that the job's any harder. It's not. Maybe even easier. but it is a different set of skills that are required to really deploy what you know into a piece of software. As you said, how do you talk to the technology team? You can't do everything. I always say product managers, I I promise you, I can't hold it up because of what I've written on it. I've got an enumerated list, starts at 1, goes to 10. I've got one every single day. That's what product managers do. And getting into that habit, when you come from industry, you know everything. And everything is a lot to hold in your head, and it makes it really hard to prioritize. So yeah, I do think it's critical. I do not think it's BS at all. But actually, the real magic trick is having the right balance in the organization, so that not only do you have that knowledge in the organization and readily available, but you can also, trying to think what the right word is, mobilize that knowledge so that you can use it in your product. So it's absolutely critical, but it's not the only thing you need to do it well.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if we're trying to be right as much as give something more than fodder for people to think and
Right.
consider and maybe confirm that, hey, we're doing it kind of like that. I like that. For me, I've always said I like taking a few chances with a new set of eyes and somebody that has these skills, not those. Can I augment that? And can I put them in a situation where they can develop and grow? Because that's another part of leadership, and everything you talked about kind of features that. In the interest of time, because we have big conversations, we always have. And what I want to switch us into is the fun question segment so that we can get this bad boy in the can, and then
Okay,
we'll work on scheduling our next one. But are you ready?
let's go.
Fun question number one. No wrong answers on any of this stuff. First couple ones are softballs, which means they're pretty easy. What is your favorite music?
Oh, Queen. I don't know if it's showing. It's my Queen mug.
Ah,
Freddie Mercury forever.
all right. All right. Next fun question. What is your favorite sport or hobby? And on sport, it does not have to be one that you play. It could be one that you like to watch and support and cheer for.
It's cricket, but a close number two is baseball, which is like speed cricket.
All right. All right. Good stuff. The third fun question, the final question. This is the big one. And no wrong answers here. What is your philosophy, perspective, anything at all when it comes to this concept of work-life balance?
Wowzers. So I can only give my personal answer, and I think it can vary for other people. But um, I believe you need to be able to commit yourself to both fully. So 9 to 5, or look, I'm sometimes it needs to be more hours for me, and that's absolutely okay. But when I'm at work and I'm throwing everything I've got at it. But when I walk out that door and close the office door, I play just as hard as I work. So for me, I think you've all got to find where your line is, and I encourage you, for you and the people you love and that you're with, find where you need your line to be, and then respect the line and throw yourself equally into those two things. Because that for me is, I'm sure if we invited my wife in, she'd say, yeah, you're a nightmare workaholic. And sure. But if you also said, right, but what do we do on Saturday and Sunday? We have a hell of a lot of fun.
And everyone, without much detail, I can confirm that because we had, without that question, quite a conversation around that when we were out in Raleigh. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for knowing you. I'm really excited that we finally got this one done, and we're going to do it again. Nigel Hughes, thank you, sir, for being with me here on CMMS Radio.
I really appreciate it, Greg. Thank you so much for the chance. And now we figured out how to do it. We don't need to wait 9 months, right?
That's a fact.
Bye-bye.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.